Thank you for the wonderful introduction, born to be wide. And I honestly thought you were going to say, this is Dr. Kiran Rao and he's wide and so he can talk about it. Anyway, thank you all. My presentation today will talk about the Airbus wide-body strategy. You'll hear a few things that John has already mentioned, just to let you know that John took the charts from me, I didn't take the charts from him. So, 3,500 aeroplanes sold in the wide-body category. That's a pretty impressive number. And that number includes, of course, the A300s that we started off with. We have the A300s, then B2s, B4s that then ended up becoming the A300s and A310s. Then we moved into the 330, 340 family, which has led us to the 350s, and of course the A380s at the top end. If we look at the absolute numbers, you know, us marketing guys can always pin any story that we like, but with 3,500 airplanes sold in these categories, it of course is an impressive number. But if you were to look at the categories individually, if you take just the 330, 340, 1,650 airplanes sold, you compare that with any other wide-body aircraft, whether it's the 747, which came close with about 1,500 aeroplanes sold, the 777s, that includes all of them, that's about just under 1,600 as well. So the A330, A340 category dominated the wide-body sales. If we look at it, since the launch of the A350, you'll also see that with the number of A330s we've actually sold more wide-bodies than Boeing since the launch of the Airbus A350. So the aircraft has a very proud history, all our wide bodies. In fact, Airbus was the inventor of the wide body twin. At that time, people laughed at the fact that we would have a wide body twin aisle aircraft with just two engines. But yes, Airbus launched the A300B2. You'll see the first flight test aircraft across in our museum. But the aircraft, of course, sold many airplanes and developed a new market back in the 1970s. The A300s, as I said, progressed onto the 300s and 310s, onto the 330s, and now, of course, we have the most beautiful wide-body airplane ever, and that is the A350. The A350 will go into much more detail of why it's a very successful airplane, why we've sold so many of those airplanes in the coming slides. But having sold 3,500 airplanes, we still have a very healthy backlog, nearly 1,200 airplanes in backlog. That is taking, of course, into account the sad news this morning of the cancellation, but still 1,200 aeroplanes approximately yet to be delivered in the wide-body category. So why do we sell so many airplanes, and what is it that we have to do when we come to strategize and to think about the aircraft that we want? Well, the most important thing that we have to have in the airline business today is to have a family of aircraft. So you've heard, of course, all of the 320 and the 320neo going from the 19s to the 20s, 21s, the CEOs, the NEOs. But of course, in the wide-body category as well, it is equally important to have a range of airplanes that we can offer to our customers. The customers today are operating on thin margins. They have to make sure they're highly optimized. They have to make sure that every route they fly, they have the right airplane for that particular route. And when you go through the different families of aircraft that we have, the 330, 250 seats to 300 seats, this aircraft, of course, highly optimized for the regional networks, highly optimized also now for the medium to long haul with the introduction, as you heard from John today, of the 242-ton airplanes. Then there's, of course, the A380, and the A380 is the most popular aircraft when it comes to passenger appeal. It's the aircraft which the airlines have started to love because they know when they put the aircraft into service, it simply attracts passengers from other carriers. We have data to show that. John has discussed it this morning, and when any aircraft has to compete against an A380, it is only an A380 that can compete with an A380. And then, of course, we have to complete the wide-body family, we have the A350s, and I will now discuss as we go through why certain of these aircraft and why the choices that we have made in designing these aircraft have allowed us to be the dominant aircraft in the wide-body category. So first, passenger comfort. What does the passenger care about? When the passenger boards the airplane, of course, they're looking for the lowest possible fare for the tickets, but when they're on board the aircraft, they also have to have the feeling that they're in a space which they can enjoy for whether it's a short sector, medium, or even 14-hour sectors. And in this category of the airline's choice, of course, the Airbus aircraft come out to be the winners. It's not just the wide windows, it's not just the roomy interiors, it's not just the bigger overhead bins. It is the fact that what does the passenger really see, and you saw this slide earlier, but the passenger really, when he's in the seat, it's the wide-bodiness. And as John, this is where I disagree with John, by the way. He said you have to be short and slim to be intelligent. I say you have to be taller and wider to be intelligent. And in being taller and wider, when you sit in these seats, of course, and I hope some of you have had a chance to see the difference between the 17-inch and the 18-inch seats, it does make a difference. It's only an inch, but it really does make a difference. Yes, the 787 may have a bigger window than the A380, or the A330, sorry. It may have a bigger window, but at the end of the day, does the passenger care about the bigger window, or does the passenger care about the fact that he fits in the seat more comfortably? And these are the criteria that the passengers are choosing when selecting an aircraft to fly. So you saw this as well, and that is 18 inches. When you go across the different aircraft types that we have, we all meet the 18-inch category when we come to our wide body, or as a matter of fact, even our single-aisle aircraft. A lot of surveys have been done to test the difference, because we know, why did Boeing choose to go 10 abreast? Did they go 10 abreast because they just felt that it's more comfortable at 9 abreast? No, they didn't. They had to go 10 abreast because the economics of the 777 simply don't work at 9 abreast. When they launched the 787, it was originally an 8 abreast airplane. Why did they have to go to 9 abreast? They had to go to 9 abreast because the economics didn't work against an A330 at 8 abreast. But in going from 9 abreast to 10 abreast on a 777, you can sell it any way you like, but at the end of the day, the passenger notices the difference. And the surveys done within the industry, and this data is available within the industry and the carriers themselves, shows that when a passenger compares the 777 at 10 abreast with an A380 at 10 abreast, very different comfort levels of seats. Of course, and to be honest, you didn't have to waste your money on a survey, you just had to go and sit in it. And that, what you'll find is that the airline passengers simply don't like sitting in a 777. They may pay and fly on a 777, but they don't appreciate sitting in a 777 at 10 abreast. And the same is true if you were to compare even a 9 abreast 777. It may have the same seat comfort as an A380, but now the ambience of the A380 takes over. And the fact that the A380 then delivers more comfort, not just in the seat, but in the overall space of the airplane, again shows the difference between the A380 and the 777s when it comes to passenger appeal and passenger comfort. Economics is is the most important criteria when we look at the families of airplanes. So when we compare the airplanes that we have, whether it's 330s against the 787s, whether it's 350s against 787s and 777s, or 380s, either against 777s or against the 747-8. In all these different categories and all these different markets, the Airbus aircraft come out ahead. So let's just look at the detail between the individual families. If you look at the 330s today, the 330-200 or the 330-300, just look at some of the basic data that we have. Whether it's seating capacity, the 330-200 and the 787 are more or less the same seating capacity. A seat here, a seat there, depending on whether the business class or the door positions, etc. But all airlines will tell you, whether it's the 330-200 or the 330-300, the aircraft have the same seating capacity as the 787-8 and the 787-9. In terms of range, the 330-200, as it is today, has equal range to the 787-8. When we come to try and selling the 330-200s or the 787, unless the airline today really needs the range capability of the aircraft, what we tend to find is, whether it's the 787 or the 330-200, the airlines tend to step up to the 330-300s and the 787-9. That's not to say that the aircraft were not efficient in the past. When fuel prices were lower, the 330-200 was the dominant aircraft in this category. As fuel prices have increased, the 330-300 has become the dominant aircraft in this category. If we compare with the 330-300 against the 787-9, what you'll find is, again, equal seating capacity. Yes, we have a little less range, but the average sector of an A330 is something like 1,200 nautical miles. So, you know, you don't need always to be able to have 8,000 miles of range to be able to sell to the customer. So range doesn't become part of the equation. But when you look at the economics, yes, the 787 promised the world an awful lot. But I think of all the promises that it made, what airlines have found out is that the A330 actually still has an awful lot to deliver. It was our teams within Airbus that predicted a few years ago that the 330 would stop selling. Well, all our predictions were wrong. And the reason they were wrong is when you compare the aircraft item by item. Fuel, yes, we burn a little bit more fuel, but there is also the maintenance cost. When you come to look at the maintenance cost of the A330 generation of aircraft compared to the 787, the A330 is an awful lot less to maintain. It's much simpler aircraft to look after. When it comes to the engines on the 787 are weighing about 5 tons, that's per ship set, more than the engines on a A330. Yes, they burn less fuel, but boy do they cost more to maintain as well. So if you put the maintenance cost of the aircraft, if you put the fact, another interesting fact for you, you would all think, if you read through the marketing material of the 787 when it came out, that it was going to be an extremely light aeroplane and it was going to make all these metal aeroplanes obsolete. Well, I don't know how many of you realize it, but an A330 is actually lighter than a 787. A330 is a couple of tons lighter than a 787-9. You put all of that together, and what you find is that we have, yes, a slightly higher fuel burn, but we have significantly lower maintenance costs. We have significantly lower airframe maintenance costs. We have lower navigation and landing charges, especially when we take our regional variants with the lower takeoff weights. You put all of that together, and you add the fact that the A330 is an aircraft that can have a very attractive selling price. You put that together, and we can easily demonstrate to the airlines that we have greater than 10% lower operating costs than today's generation 787s. That is a fact, and that is why the A330 has continued to sell. Over 700 airplanes sold since the launch of the A350. And that's and that's going to continue. Yes, we can talk about A330neos, but the A330ceo is an aircraft that still has a very strong economic proposition when we come to talk to our airline customers. We have, of course, developed the regional variant of the A330. This is an aircraft with a takeoff weight of 199 tons. It's an aircraft, when we compare with two single-aisle aircrafts, and this is very specific for the Chinese market, where the congestion in the Chinese airspace means that if they are able to maintain the growth rates, the only way they'll do that is to replace two single-aisle aircraft with one wide-body airplane. And when you put two 200-seaters against one 400-seater, what do you find? You find that the A330, without taking into the fact that it can carry an awful lot of cargo, 13, 14 tons. We discount the fact that the cargo is available. If we simply look at the passengers, we simply look at the fuel, we look at the maintenance costs, we look at all the different cost elements, we can come out with the fact that the A330 regional is a much more economic aircraft in these very crowded skies, like China, like Southeast Asia, in India, and other countries will soon follow. A350, it's an aircraft that we put together to complete our wide-body family. Yes, we had the 330s down at the bottom, we had the A380s at the top. We used to have the A340, but unfortunately the fuel prices kicked in and the A340 became less and less efficient. But the A350 is an aircraft that has stepped into this market and has stepped into the market with an extraordinary level of fuel efficiency and an extraordinary level in terms of comfort and all the other attributes that the airlines judge. So if we put the airplanes up against each other, what do we find? Well, the 350-800 and the 787, just like the 330-200 and the 787, these categories are actually more difficult to sell today because with the high cost of fuel, with the high operating costs, the number of seats simply make the break-even load factors difficult. But people would still select a 350-800 if they were, for example, wanting to look at range. 350-800 is an 8,000-mile range-capable aeroplane, and it has at least 30 seats more than the 787-8. So more seats, more range, more comfort, better economics. The 350-900 is an aeroplane that's unbeatable when it comes to this category of aeroplane. When we look at any competition, we're between 30 and 35 seats more in the A350-900 than the 787-9. Most of the airlines who are buying the aircraft in this size category are in markets that are expanding. Whether they're expanding at 4% or at 8%, it doesn't matter. At that level of expansion, the additional seats in the A350-900 make all the difference. What you have to imagine is that each seat in an airplane for a long-haul operator is worth about $2 million. So when we look at the economics of the A350-900 versus the 787-9, each one of those 35 seats has the potential to contribute $2 million, so up to $70 million worth of additional revenue during the life of the aircraft. That, now whether you argue about 1% of fuel here or 1% of maintenance cost there, doesn't make the difference. The difference comes in the number of seats, and each one of those seats at 18 inches versus 16.9 or 17 inches. We have more seats, more comfort, and a much higher revenue potential. So 777-300, yes, it was the darling of the airline industry, but the darling of the airline industry has come to the end, and the A350-1000 has stepped in. The 350-1000 offers the same seating capacity, it offers the same payload range capability, but it does so with 25% less fuel. So, as much as Boeing would like to say that, you know, the 777 is still a great airplane, well, if it was so great, then why did they have to launch the 777-9X? Sorry, I'll skip through these quickly. And let's talk a little bit about the 9X. Well, when Boeing came to realize that the 777-300ER could no longer hold its ground against the 350-1000, they had to do something to try and recover that market. So could they build an all-new airplane? Well, if you look at it, if you build an all-new airplane, you're going to spend an awful lot of money. They've gone through the 787 experience. The 787 cannot stretch to the size of the 350-1000. So the only option open to them was to go with the 777 fuselage. With the 777 fuselage, what became very apparent very early on is that it didn't matter how efficient the engines were, and GE delivered an engine that was 10% more efficient in terms of fuel. Now we're 25% better. GE delivers an engine that can do up to 10% more. But those engines, like the 787 engines, are heavy engines, so that takes away from the performance. So then the only option left then is to recover that through aerodynamics. The only way to recover that through aerodynamics is to have a very long wing. But you can't operate that very long wing to most of the airports, so fold the wings. It's not that the airlines want to have folding wings. They don't want folding wings. But in order to get the fuel efficiency, Boeing has to go outside the Cody box. And if it goes outside that box, it has to fold the wings to get back in it. So it's not that it's a great technology that, you know, we're all desperate to have. It isn't. It's just a fact that they have an airplane that's inefficient if it has to fit within the box. Therefore, it has to go outside of the Cody box. And to bring it back in, they have to fold the wings. But even then, put it all together, the aircraft is still heavier, the aircraft still burns more fuel, and so now the only way to recover the difference is to actually add more seats. So how do you add more seats? Well, you can make it a little bit longer. It's already a long airplane. You make it a little bit longer. But still, the seats are not enough. So now what do? Well, you now have to put more seats in the airplane by going to 10 abreast. Oh, but most of the airlines don't like our 10 abreast on the 777. That was the conclusion. So what you have to do, you have to carve out the interior. Well, we thought of that on the original 330 going to the 350, and we ran into a lot of issues when it came to temperature and noise. I'm sure they will run into the same issues. But still, they've realized that their 10 abreast on today's 777 is not good enough. So they've had to try and carve out the interior and go for a few more inches. A few more inches divided by 10 seats is going to make a difference, but it's not going to make that much of a difference. So you still have an airplane that has inferior comfort, you still have an airplane that burns more fuel, and you still have an airplane that costs more to maintain. So when the 350-1000 comes up against the 777-9X, we remain very confident that we will have an aircraft that will deliver to the airlines an aircraft that has better fuel efficiency, has the range capability, has the low maintenance cost, and delivers all the economic parameters that the airlines are looking for. When it comes to the A380, yes, everyone loves the A380. They all love to fly on the A380. Even my mother recently flew across from Australia and was very disappointed and told Singapore Airlines that she was expecting an A380 and she got a 777. Luckily, on her way back, the airline made sure she was on the A380. But the fact is that even a grandmother can tell you the difference between flying on an A380 or on a 777. So the comfort aspect is taken for granted today. The A380 is the most comfortable airplane in the skies, and the passengers, even with all these years that have gone by since we launched the aircraft, still chase the aircraft. But from an airline's point of view, it's more than just the comfort and the economics. It's all about the connections, it's about the schedule, it's about the connectivity, it's about getting passengers through the hubs. It's getting the passengers through the hubs at the right time. It's about getting the passengers on the time schedules. Yes, you could put 4 flights between Singapore and London during with 777s. You could probably put 6. But when it comes to these long-haul sectors, passengers have a preference in terms of flying. They don't want to fly at 8 o'clock in the morning taking off from Singapore. They want to fly at 10 o'clock at night when they've had a day's work, when they've had a day to do what they need to do, and they can sleep on the flights. So the concentration, it doesn't matter which route and which network you look at, you'll find there are concentrations and there are banks of flights which are more important than other banks of flights. And in order for the airlines to maximize the number of passengers who can fly on those routes to get the right connections, the size of the A380 is important. It isn't just simply that the market is doubling and the market is increasing year on year. It's the fact that the airlines have those banks of flights, those schedules to maintain, those preferential time slots that are important to the passengers. That's where the A380 comes in. It delivers the right number of passengers at the right time on the right network. And it does so, of course, with great comfort and with great efficiency. You saw earlier the example of British Airways replacing all its 3 747s with 2 A380s. Well, here's another example. You have Air France replacing a 777 and an A340 with 1 A380. The passengers, yes, now taken for granted that they all appreciate the fact that it's an A380 and not a 777 or an A340. They also see the significant cost reductions when they replace the 2 airplanes with 1. And they also have another slot to play with, or to sell, or to give up, whichever the airline's choices are. But all the attributes of the A380 are clear, and the airlines are seeing it day on day that the A380 is now the preferred way to conduct a lot of these long-haul, high-density routes. As I mentioned, the traffic will double. We have 4.7% year-on-year growth, and that will continue. We've seen it historically. Every 15 years we'll see the traffic doubling, and again, the size of our wide-body aircraft, whether the A380 with its 500 plus seats, whether it's the A350-900 versus the 787-9 with 35 additional seats, whether it's on the long, thin routes where we have 30 seats more than the 787-8. All of these routes will help us to justify that the size and the economics of our aircraft will be superior. In terms of congestion, you've seen as well, and again, you've all flown here, you've all been through the mega hubs, you've all seen the traffic. But with the type of growth that we see, we will see the number of congested airports increasing. And that's not just in places like China, it's in all over the world that we will see significant changes to the airports in order to cope with the growth. British Airways was able to cope with that growth, carrying 2.3 million passengers more, just simply by adding the A380 into its network. So yes, Terminal 5 is already congested, the airport in Heathrow is already congested, but the simple fact of replacing 747s with A380s allowed them to carry an extra 2.3 million passengers. India took its time to decide to allow the A380 into the Indian skies. They didn't say no to the A380 because they didn't like the look of it or it was too comfortable. It was known by the Indian government, and I can say it openly, that if the A380 came into India before the local carriers had a chance to stabilize themselves, then airlines flying the A380 would dominate the skies. And so the Indian government had to protect the Indian carriers against the airlines flying A380s into the Indian market. And what's happened is, as soon as the Indian government has, well, they've given time for the local carriers to to ensure themselves against the onslaught of the A380. The A380 has now been allowed into India. We had Singapore Airlines already start with a flight to Bombay and a flight to Delhi. We have Emirates starting in July, and I think by the end of this year we'll have 7 A380 flights into India. And this is a new dimension as well to the A380 operations, and we've seen it evolve. The A380 was originally designed to fly long-haul operations, but what the airlines have started to find is that actually flying it on short to medium haul sectors, when I say that about, let's say, 4, 5, 6 hours, they find that the efficiency of the A380 is actually greater than flying on the long haul sectors. And they start to make, they're already making money on the A380 and long haul. They make more money with the A380 flying on short haul to medium haul sectors. Flying to India from Singapore, flying to Hong Kong, flying to Tokyo. If you go to Tokyo first thing in the morning, it's full of A380s, but they haven't all come 14 hours to Tokyo. They've come from Bangkok, they've come from Singapore, they've come from Malaysia. So these aircraft are now not just finding their niche in the long-haul market, but the A380 is also finding its niche in the regional market as well. I'm stuck. Can someone move it along? Oh, thank you. Oh, all right. Well, apologies for that, but I pressed it too many times and now it's going too fast. Okay, so we've seen the fact that the Airbus wide-body aircraft have all the right attributes when it comes to the size, when it comes to the economics, when it comes to the comfort. But what brings all the airplanes together is, of course, the fact that they all share the same cockpit. Yes, each airplane type that evolves adds new technology, adds new innovations to the cockpit. But as those innovations are added, we still maintain the commonality with the aircraft that have been produced before that. So whether it's the 350 now coming into service, which builds on the A380 cockpit, or the 380 that built on the 330 cockpit, or the 330 that had built, the aircraft all share the common CCQ, the cross-group qualification. And when you talk to airlines, this isn't just a nice marketing gimmick. When you talk to the airlines, the fact that they can send their pilots, and the pilots don't have to spend 30 days in training, the pilots don't have to come away from their normal airline schedules, the pilots don't have to spend days in hotel on per diem allowances. All that may sound just like a little bit of money, but when you add it up, it all adds up to be an awful lot of money when it comes to the commonality, the worth of commonality in an airline. It can easily be worth more than $1 million per aircraft when we discuss with the airlines how they would use the commonality between the various Airbus wide-body aircraft. You can, in fact, take it down to the single aisles as well and share the CCQ and MF between a single aisle and a wide-body aeroplane. But just within the wide-body family, the fact that an airline can fly 330s, 350s, and even the A380 with the same pilots, it makes a huge difference to their bottom line. So in conclusion, I believe we have the right family of wide-body aircraft. We have a very complete family of wide-body aircraft, whether it's for the airline that needs to do an hour and a half flight on the regional operations, whether it's for the airline that has to have a niche market, very long, thin route, flying 16 hours with an A350-800, whether it's an airline that needs to fly on a regular service 8 to 10 hours with a 350-900, or moving into replacing their 777s with a 350-1000, or of course dominating their markets with the A380. Airbus has the right aeroplane in the right category and in the right markets. Thank you.